Crosstown Rangers did not make the playoffs this year. They fired their coach David Quinn after a really rough end to the season, losing 2 games back-to-back to the Islanders, then the Tom Wilson situation. Whole bunch of things lead to the end of David Quinn's run as the coach of the Rangers. They hired Gerard Gallant, who, after being fired by Vegas midseason last year, which was very odd, goes off, coaches the World Championships team for Canada this year and wins the gold medal. Now he's the coach of the Rangers. He's, best available coach, goes to probably the best available position. Now the Rangers are in a situation where they have to make the playoffs next year. Personally, I do like the hire. It was a little bit early, but when you're going after the best guy, you got to do it as soon as possible. So I think Chris Drury is 1 for 1 in terms of his handlings as the general manager. I don't know if he's going to hire a president of hockey operations. I would think that's next. But if he doesn't, I think he's 1 for 1 headed into the draft. And we'll see how this one plays out, of course. But David Quinn did not work out, and Gerard Gallant takes the reign for the Blue Shirts. So I'm curious, your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, since the departure of David Quinn, kind of the whole search for the next coach, I think Gallant kind of seemed like the guy who made the most sense throughout this whole pursuit. He really seems like the guy who's going to give you the safest floor. I know David Quinn was someone that didn't have a ton of experience before, his shot with the Rangers. They kind of rolled the dice on him. And I think this is a huge upgrade. I mean, we saw what he did with Vegas and played such a crucial role in making them a contender. And honestly, I thought he was going to end up maybe going to Seattle. Like, wouldn't that have been fascinating if he kind of elevates this one expansion franchise and then goes on to the next one?
It would have been really, really interesting. It would have. And once they got to other teams firing their coaches and he hadn't been hired by Seattle, that's kind of what I knew, because if Seattle really wanted him and he really wanted Seattle, he would have been hired in like April, I think. But the GM of Seattle says, Ron Francis, he says they're going to hire a coach before the end of the month. So that one's going to come up soon. Now that you mentioned that, the one I thought he was going to go to, this is a recent thing, was Buffalo. Buffalo fired their coach midseason, Ralph Kruger. Don Granato comes in. He does a pretty good job, but they are doing a coaching search. And, of course, Granato, who is the interim, is part of that coaching search and interviewed. But then Buffalo won the draft lottery a couple weeks ago. So they have the right to draft University of Michigan defenseman Owen Power, who's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick. He's a really good player. He's from Canada. He made the Canadian World Championships team, which Gallant coached, and then they won the gold medal. So I was like, oh, well, maybe Gallant's going to go to Buffalo to coach Owen Power because he just realized how great this guy is. Also, there was Matty Beniers, who's also from Michigan, who was a top pick, so maybe he'd go to Buffalo and pick Beniers. He watched a couple of the top prospects play. He coached them, and the team with the number 1 overall pick was looking for a coach. So I thought that could be a really interesting transition, but he ended up taking the best available job, and it's really hard to deny that. Lafreniere didn't go out there to play for the team, but we know how good he can be. And Capo Caco made a couple steps forward this year, and Panarin and Mika, and this team can be really, really good next year. And I think they have to make the playoffs, and that's a lot to say for a coach in his first year. This is a veteran coach who's made the playoffs with teams who don't have those expectations. This team does have those expectations, and we'll see what they do come the summer free agency-wise. I think that's going to be really interesting because, like every team in the NHL, they're out of money. So it's going to be very, very interesting.
2 things, Chris. 2 things. One, with the Buffalo fit, I just think that's going to be a tough spot. There's just so much uncertainty with Eichel.
Oh, my God. The guy who takes that job is a saint. I mean, they're going to trade Jack Eichel any day now, pretty much. The Athletic reported today that talks are heating up. So Jack Eichel's gone. They have the first overall pick, great, but their last first overall pick does not look good right now, Rasmus Dahlin. Sam Reinhart might leave. They got no goalie. I mean, they are bad. I could argue that they're worse than the team that lost the draft lottery and ended up with Eichel. Like this team, the 2021-22 Sabres might be worse than the 2014-15 ones were, which if you said that after they lost the draft lottery and didn't get McDavid and got Eichel, you'd be like, well, where's Eichel? Like, he can't possibly be on the team, but he's still on the team. You're right. All right, what's point number 2? Because you're 100% right about that one.
Well, just follow up real quick. I saw Jack Eichel play in college. He plays right down the street from me at BU. Point number 2 is I don't think that is completely unfair, those playoff expectations in year one, because I think those existed this season.
Mm-hmm.
I think this season was a disappointment for the Rangers. I think they have a ton of talent, and as your young guys progress with Mika, that's a good team. I think that's a playoff caliber team.
They should be. And the only reason they didn't have playoff expectations, in my book at least, is they got put in the deepest division, right? So you had, even before you got to the Rangers, you had 5 teams for 4 spots. The 4 teams who made the playoffs ended up being Pittsburgh, the Islanders, the Washington, and Boston. So you knew those 4 teams were going to be good. Then everybody thought that Philly was going to have a good year this year. They were terrible. And then you got to the Rangers. The only 2 teams who were completely out of it were Buffalo and New Jersey. And even there were some hot takes where, oh, maybe Buffalo with Taylor Hall have a good season. No. Maybe New Jersey will get it together. No. But there was still thought that they could. So they got put in the deepest division. So really, it was going to be hard to make the playoffs in that division. Mm-hmm. I would have liked to see, now obviously not actually because I'm an Islander fan, but I would have liked to see what happens to the Rangers if they're allowed to play those last 15 games of 2020, because they were on a really good run. They looked like they were going to make the playoffs, as opposed to the Islanders, who were on a complete free fall. They could have stuck into the playoffs. They could have jumped the Islanders and made it very easily. So you're interested to see what happens there. Now, of course, they do make it to the bubble and they get knocked out by Carolina. So, yeah, they definitely have playoff expectations. I don't think there's any doubt in that.
Do you think they'll be a contender, or are they going to throw out kind of just an offer for Eichel? Do you think that's going to happen? Or there's been rumors around it.
There have been since the beginning. It has to involve Mika to make it work, I think. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Drury wants to trade Mika. Really, the rumors surrounding it were when Quinn was the coach, because you mentioned you saw Eichel play. That means you saw Quinn coach because he was his coach at BU. But I don't – I think they're going to make a run for it. I don't think they're going to land him. I think he's going to go to the Kings. I think he's going to go to the Los Angeles Kings because they have the most money. They got some older guys, Andre Kopitar, Dustin Brown. They might try to make it work. Drew Doughty has getting paid a lot of money, though. It's really tough because he's getting paid $10 million. The cap isn't going up. So it's hard to know where he's going to go, because if you just look at it, nobody has $10 million right now. So it's going to some serious Olympics, and that's going to be an interesting one.